United States, Canada, Mexico, Panama, morning, good evening, good afternoon, whenever you are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you are watching this. I'm Stacey Folly Entropy, but you can just call me Entropy, and I welcome you to the second episode of my podcast, Cosmic Commentary. I was just very anxious to start recording the next episode. It's been a few days. I am surprised I was getting as many, clicks on it as I was, but otherwise I am happy with feedback that I have gotten. Very little, but it makes sense. I'm very small still. Otherwise, what I'm going to be talking about today has been something I already talked about in a podcast I did a while back. I said it in the last episode. You won't find it again. It's not there anymore, but I believe that I will be able to expand a bit more on the concept that I presented then. I'm sure you saw the title of course you saw the title, but what I'm talking about today is something that I called a new state of mind. That was the name of the episode, but the concept I have put a bit more thought into. I've developed a bit more. And I believe I can do a better job at presenting it. Otherwise, let me just actually start jumping into it. I just sound like I'm stalling. But essentially what it is complete sensory deprivation. Little old me thought it was something special, thought it was something new, but it's just sensory deprivation, and I just wasn't too familiar with the concept. And I even emailed some philosopher at a college asking, I think I've come up with something kind of new and revolutionary, and I was wondering if it was something that was already been thought of. Yes, it's been something that's already been thought of, by the way. I was just kind of stupid. Otherwise, the philosopher, I forgot the guy's name. He did actually get back to my email. I remember years ago when I did it. He was kind of polite about it. I don't think it went anywhere, but it was interesting. I was kind of happy with myself that I was brave enough to do it in the first place. So, of course, sensory deprivation is just when you don't have, you're deprived of your senses. You can't see, you can't hear, can't smell, can't feel, can't taste. And I haven't found, but there's things out there like sensory deprivation tanks. You can just go into this room and you will essentially just float in I think highly concentrated salt water. I believe that's what it is, because that's what will make you float a lot easier. It's just salt water. Because guess what? You also have senses for body awareness. I have a body sense right now that's telling me that I'm on this side of the room. I'm also using it to make sure that I am in frame on the camera. Otherwise, that sense is also there, and these tanks can deprive you of that, of also your sight and I wouldn't say your smell. I think it's the fact that you're just not smelling, that you're not really using your smell actively. And then also, it's just a completely silent room, so you're just kind of there. Sensory deprivation has been kind of a common thing throughout history, even in a religious aspect. People will use sensory deprivation in religious practices, whether that's closing their eyes, being in quiet rooms to meditate. It is just trying to deprive your senses to remove yourself from the physical world and connect with the spiritual. I saw an interesting circumstance that I took note of. There was an experiment that was done. It was like a Russian experiment when they drugged the hell out of a man who had all his senses dampened, but he was still conscious. And when he came back to his senses, which that phrase makes a lot more sense now, or it's just whatever. I'm making connections as I speak. But when he came back to his senses, he said, "I have communicated with God," which is an interesting fact of just when you have all your senses deprived, you are on a different level. Whether you believe in spiritualism or not, it was something I was going to take note of anyway. Even yet, I was going to push it further, where not only do you have all your senses deprived, but you have all your senses deprived from the point of your existence. And I say from the point of your existence because originally I just said from birth. But that's a concept of this baby that essentially just is essentially a rag doll, and it's kind of a dark concept, so I wasn't going to word it that way. Otherwise, from the point of your existence, you have all your senses deprived of you. You have comprehended absolutely nothing in existence yet. And the question, of course, comes to mind, do you have a conscience? I asked people this, and they said, well, I would say it's not really even worth living. Which I suppose is true. I think some people would definitely be completely down over the fact that they would never be able to experience the world that they've been born into. Even more, you can't think. When I think in English. I think in my head, in my native language that I am most familiar and fluent in. But if you have all your senses deprived from the point of your existence, you can't think. I know some people don't have like a narrator in their head. There's just a small percentage not a small percentage, but a lot of the population that just doesn't have a narrator in their head. When they think, there's just not a voice there. For a lot of people, there is. I've noticed that a lot of those people are very linear in their thinking, very mathematical. It's just an observation that I've made. I don't know if it's true or not. You can't even dream. If you have all your senses deprived, you can't dream either, because your dreams are made of a lot of your imagination. They're made of things that you have seen around you in your life, and that you can't do that either, which I must say is kind of a sad fact. I think dreaming is very cool. I rarely have dreams anymore. I wish I had more, but I say that if you're no longer really having experiences in the physical world, and being deprived leaves you more connect with the spiritual, and this is where I get kind of more speculative with even my own beliefs. I believe there's a spiritual realm, and I believe in a God. I believe there's angels. I believe there's demons, and I believe in the existence of tongues. Now, when you think about it, from here, you could kind of lose interest, because I'm talking about something now that is kind of opposed to a lot of other people considering their beliefs, but I think a lot of people will be very interested to hear other people's perspective on religious concepts when I go this deep on a topic concerning spiritualism, at least. So, since you can no longer really be in the physical realm and you're more on the spiritual, what could you think in? I believe that you could probably think thoughts through angelic tongue. It's kind of a divine gift upon some people where they can actually speak in tongue. I should probably find a clip of it. I think it sounds very cool, and it comes differently for some people. Even yet, there was, and I'm going to sidetrack a bit. So I write a lot of these down because when I think about these things, I don't want to forget it. I don't want to forget these things. So I write them down in like a Google document, and I come back and I look over it occasionally. I had to for this. And not that long ago, I was introduced to a concept by Mike Adams on his podcast, Contagious Mind. And on that podcast, his first episode, he explains a concept called morphic resonancy. I would definitely go into a completely separate episode of personally explaining what morphic resonancy is because it's absolutely so interesting. But the concept essentially is that there is a universal knowledge that is imprinted on every single living creature. Where that's kind of like where instinct comes from. It's just like the interesting look that DNA and the animal DNA cannot tell an animal how to act. It just makes up its body. Sure, it can be a chemical response in the brain, but there is a level of consciousness that cannot be developed by DNA, and that's literally all that we are made of. So then the concept of morphic resonancy is that instinct is like this universal plane of just knowledge that everyone kind of has this small connection to through consciousness. And they can grasp this knowledge that's known by all. And through that, That's how animals, baby animals, when they're born, just kind of know what to do. They don't need to be taught because they already know it. And that's because they're taking this knowledge that they have access to on this plane of just universal knowledge. It's very interesting. I will talk about it more. Mike Adams, he gives a few concepts and scenario situations that even I don't have the intellectual knowledge to explain, but I'll put a link to it. It's very interesting if you want to look more into that. But otherwise, with that concept, someone being completely deprived of their senses in their head, I believe you could probably still have this conscious connection to this plane of knowledge, where then you could actually have a sense of comprehension for things that are beyond your scope of ability. Like the consciousness of instinct, you can now actually know, like, hey, this is actually out there. I don't know what's out there. I'm kind of just a conscience in my head, and I don't know who I am or what I am, but I can connect to this level of universal knowledge. Now, I won't go any further because even yet, that's just speculative. It's theoretical, but it's very interesting. I could have gone about this entire podcast being like, hey, this concept is really interesting. You should check this out, and you should listen to me ramble about it for a bit. But I want there to be more of a point to this podcast episode. I'm not just going to say, here's something interesting, I present you it, and then there's nothing really else to do with it. So I'm going to actually kind of switch this around into more of a applicable application, kind of a life lesson. So there is a story, and I swear, I don't know where I heard it. I don't know where it's from. It's like a Mandela effect for me. I don't know where I heard it. It's just in my head, but it's a very clear story in my head. I don't know when it was taught to me, but I'll tell you about it right now. So essentially, there was a kid, and he was going to end his life. I don't know if YouTube likes the word suicide, so I'm not going to say it. I'll just say this boy was going to end his life, and he had a date plan. He went to a bridge, and he's standing on the edge of this bridge, and next to him is a bench, and come along is this guy. He has glasses on, and he has a cane. He's a blind man. He sits down on the bench, that's right next to this boy, and he can kind of just sense that the boy's there, and he turns his head in the general direction. He looks at the boy and says, "Can you tell me what the water looks like?" And this boy, who's currently staring over the edge at the water, looks at him, and he's like, "Well, it's blue, and it's transparent." And the blind man goes, "What is blue? Can you explain to me what blue is?" The boy's like, I don't know. I don't know how to explain a color to you." And the boy was so kind of taken aback by this question, but also by the sincerity of this man's voice, that he didn't jump that day. He left, but when he was gone, when the boy left that bridge, he again went into a slum of depression, and he came back to the bridge to jump. Well, the blind man was there once again. And he says, "Can you tell me what the sunset looks like?" And the boy already knows. He can't say it's orange, it's yellow. I can't tell him about the horizon, how it's pink. So then the boy, out of sheer kind of pity for this man, he tries to figure out ways to explain to him. He explains like textures, because the man can feel textures. The boy comes back occasionally. He meets up with the blind man at this one spot, and he shows him things to feel and things to hear that would explain like ripples or smoothness, wetness. And the more that this boy does that, he looks over at the sunset, and he's like, "This is beautiful. What a beautiful sunset. What a beautiful world. And I have taken it for granted." And this blind man beside me, who has never experienced it, is living just as happy as never having ever known it. And the boy then learned through the blind man how to look deeper into his environment and be like, I'm truly living in a beautiful world. And then the boy says, I will continue to live because I want to be here and experience such a beautiful world. I don't know where that story came from. It makes me almost want to tear up when I think about it. But it's like a Mandela effect for me. I don't know where I got the story from, but it's there and it's very prevalent in my head. And I present it to you because when you think about the possibility of being completely deprived of all your senses, you are essentially unaware. You have taken for granted, in a sense, the entire world. And I know a lot of people are lucky. People are kind of take our sight for granted. We take our hearing for granted. We take our taste for granted. I know a lot of time with COVID and stuff, a lot of people lost their taste, and a lot of people are like, damn, I miss tasting these types of foods. Or that people lost their smell and they're like, I wish I could smell it. It smells bad now, or something tastes bad now. And it's like, you really took it for granted, didn't you? Well, because it's pleasantry. It's just pleasantries, and it's just a very good look with that story at being able to look at our environments and love the world for what it is. I believe that actually would be a very good means of getting someone out of a very low spot, because usually people who are in very low spots or are depressed are kind of in their head too much. So when it comes to being in your head, taking things for granted, don't do so. There's a lot to experience out in the world, and it only takes for you to actually put the effort to look and realize what there is around you. And that's the lesson that I believe that you can actually take from this hypothetical concept that I began talking about in the beginning of this podcast. I think it relates, but at the same time, it kind of feels like I changed the topic, but I still think it's very applicable and it's an interesting segue. So that is actually all I have to say. I thank you for watching. Thank you for watching my second episode. I got more planned. I'm thinking that I will probably release an episode a week every Thursday, but I won't say that. Well, I will say that. I will hopefully do that, but to get some stuff done, you got to do some mental gymnastics around yourself to keep up motivation, etc. So I thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you.